So Randy and Misty, we're here this morning with Jody at Kleiner Park. I'm enjoying La Di Da coffee, by the way, out of Kuna. Very good. White chocolate coconut. Good flavor, by the way. I really like it. So if you're in Kuna and need coffee, go to La Di Da. Not a sponsor, but you know, hey, we like to give props. All right, so we're here with Jody, and let's talk about the case of Ronie. We're discussing the case of Ronie Parrott, who disappeared August 23rd of 2015, and then was her body was discovered in the foothills February 13th of 2016. She was a murder victim, shot twice in the head. So, unfortunately. So, all right, Jody, thank you so much for joining us here this morning. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to talk to us. We'll start off with a simple question. Did you know Ronie very well, or?
I knew Ronie for almost 10 years, since I was young, even before I was even an adult. Mostly by association with knowing Dave. Since I was about 16 years old, because where there was Dave, Ronie was often, present a lot of the time. They had been really good friends for 20 some odd years, and they went to high school together. So I knew Ronie pretty well, pretty personally for a lot of years.
So did you know Ronie during the time? So you were around Ronie a little bit during the time that she disappeared then?
Yeah.
And how would you describe Ronie?
Well, Ronie was an exuberant individual. She was very affectionate with people. She had her problems like any human being. She struggled with narcotics abuse off and on throughout the years, but she never really let it get her down. She was always kind of striving to try to have a good life and to try to make sure that people around her were okay and that they were taken care of. Although her life was troubled, like some people's can be, I would say that at heart she was a really good person.
That's what we keep hearing over and over again.
Yeah, a lot of people have described her as extremely generous and very good-hearted person. So you worked for Playing Buffalo also at the time. So describe that work scenario a little bit.
Oh, it's complicated for sure. Mostly because the original owner of the company, the guy who started the company, he was another individual who was a little disorganized, unfocused.
Is this Jerry?
Yeah, this is Jerry. Disorganized, unfocused, lack of priorities and things. So we often had, equipment difficulties because of lack of maintenance and things like that. He had a tendency to, spend the company money in wrong ways. I heard rumors from some people that he had originally just been kind of using it as a front for drug trafficking, as a way to launder the money. But in terms of just what it was, the career field that it got me into, I loved firefighting. It was just too hard on my body, and I had to quit. I made some really good friends there while I was doing it. This bug is right in my eye. Ouch. It went right in there. Ow. But so I loved the firefighting. I made a lot of really good friends. I still talk to a bunch of the guys from the crew. In fact, I just saw Terry a couple days ago. I just ran into him. So we're still really close.
Terry Jr. TJ?
Yes, yeah. TJ. I call him Terry because there was a transition where he went from being little TJ, young TJ, to kind of, he got his things organized. He had a clear revelation on who he wanted to be as a man. So I view him as an adult.
Yeah.
And Terry is how I identify him now.
TJ, yeah, and just so you know, TJ is one of the people we've spoken to already. So I don't know if he mentioned that to you or not.
Yeah, we chatted a little bit about it. While he was at my place the other day.
So how did you hear about, because you told us that you had heard about us, how did you hear about what we were doing?
So my husband came home like 2 days ago, because he talked to a friend who was completely unrelated to any of this situation, but a friend of ours who was wanting to get together for dinner, just to catch up, and said, oh yeah, these podcasters posted on Facebook that they were trying to get a hold of Jody. So it was kind of fourth hand, I think.
I think that she was discarded as if she didn't matter.
Yeah.
She was, and she wouldn't be the first person in the world, in human history, who, was troubled, maybe wasn't living quite as nice of a lifestyle as the rest of society thought they should be trying for, doing something, kind of their own thing that isn't quite within the norm. And humans have had a historical habit of discarding those kinds of people.
And it's sad. So you knew Dave and Ronie, and the one thing that keeps coming up through all of these, if you watch our videos, is Dave and Ronie. How would you describe their relationship?
Also troubled, I would say. Dave had a pretty checkered past, and at the time that kind of all of this was occurring, like just in the couple of years before, he had been kind of on an upward trend from prior downward trends. I know that he spent a good chunk of time in prison during his daughter's youngest years, and I know that bothered him a lot. That was one of the things that kind of kept eating at him, like an individual. That time that he spent there definitely had him kind of institutionalized. So he had definitely some aggressive and dissociative tendencies, for sure. And he would kind of whiplash. So I don't know for sure, because he probably would never have sought out a mental health professional, but just from my own experiences with people who suffered from bipolar mood disorder, I would have put him somewhere in a category of being manic, a bit for sure. And with that comes sleepless nights, lack of rest, coupled with narcotics abuse started to be a thing in those months prior to Ronie's disappearance. Manic dissociative behaviors, paranoia. So he went through kind of phases where he would recognize, where he was pretty lucid, where he would recognize that this isn't good, this isn't healthy, and I have to try harder to take good care of myself and try to get to a positive headspace. And then he would often inevitably have those backslides where he would then be just as manic, or if not more, or paranoid or aggressive toward people.
Did you ever see him be aggressive towards Ronie?
Oh yes, definitely.
Okay. So we've heard several stories of that. So.
Yeah. It was very rarely physical. It was definitely, most of the time that when I observed it, it was very, very psychological. Very, bullying language and stuff that would kind of cow Ronie. And I know that as long as they knew each other, even before I knew them, it was likely that I know that there was a semi-dating situation that had occurred sometime in that period before I knew them. And I would definitely imagine that there might have been some abusive habits that might have formed during that period. Because Ronie loved Dave. She loved Dave as much as anybody else that she took into her circle. I don't think that it would ever have been a thought in her mind to cut Dave loose. You know what I mean? Even if that had been really what would have been best for her well-being, psychologically and all. But I don't think that she would have had it in her to really cut those threads. She loved him that much.
Do you think? I was going to ask a question. I totally spaced it now.
It's okay. It happens.
Yeah.
I understand.
Do you think that? Do you think that? So I guess what I would ask is this. Also, leading up to when she was disappeared, and talking about David and stuff like that. We actually had gotten a hold of some old texts from Ronie shortly before she disappeared, where she talked about that David being angry with her about some stuff leading up to her disappearance. Do you know anything about that?
I know what Dave told me, because so that was kind of right in the period where it was like a 3.5-ish month period, and kind of right at the top of those months, he had confessed to me that he had started smoking amphetamines again, with Jerry and with Ronie. So being aware of that, and this is where maybe a little bit of where I experienced some guilt feelings, that I may have dismissed some of his talk a bit, because he was exhibiting some really paranoid behaviors, and he would call me kind of at sometimes at weird hours of the night.
Okay.
With paranoid theories about how I'm sure that Ronie is trying to get me killed, and she was hanging out with some dudes from California. They tried to run me off the road while I was going over Horseshoe Bend Hill, and I mean there are definitely some inconsiderate drivers on the road. You know what I mean? But with his brain, soaked in amphetamines, with his already paranoid tendencies, and then to add an amphetamine effect on top of it, I'm sure I probably dismissed it as I don't think that really is quite as personal or as much of a conspiracy as you think it is. It's probably just some inconsiderate driver on the road in their F-450 or whatever who thinks they're more important than you.
Right.
Really probably not be making connections, wild connections like that. But I did dismiss it. And so there was this period of months where he would often complain about he was sure she was trying to get him killed. And then probably about 6-ish weeks before she actually disappeared, he, on one of these calls from yet another new number, because he changed his number several times during that period, he told me, "I'm going to kill her before she kills me. I'm going to get her before she gets me."
Okay.
And this is again something that I kind of dismissed as being mostly paranoia, from narcotics. I guess I didn't really give it much credence, because I'd seen him gone through phases like this before, with different individuals who, maybe did something that he considered a slight, and then he feeds into his own paranoia a bit. So it wasn't like the first time I had ever seen this kind of pattern of behavior in Dave in the time that I knew him. So I kind of dismissed it as being this time it's Ronie, because, maybe she did something like forgot to feed the cats. Because it could sometimes be that small with Dave.
Okay.
It really could.
So
go ahead.
you worked for Plain Buffalo. Do you know anything about the truck that TJ has talked about being impounded?
I don't know anything about a truck being impounded for sure.
Okay.
You said you heard. So actually, I'm going to ask you a question based on what you just mentioned, where he talked about how he was concerned about Ronie hanging out with some people from California. Is there any validity to that? And the reason why I ask that is because, so with what we do, we try very hard to take an approach where we know a lot of people who a lot of people believe killed him. We don't know anybody, so we're trying to look at this very much like, I can understand why they think that this person killed her, but let's also make sure we look at all other possibilities too, because you don't want to hyper focus on one person and then completely miss something else that might have been relevant to the case. So with that being said, that's why I asked: is there any validity to the idea of her hanging around with people from California, or really anybody that may have been a danger to her?
As far as anybody specifically from California, I don't know for sure. I know that there were a lot of very young people who considered Ronie a mother to them, and I know that several of these young people would travel to California to work for the summer on some of the marijuana farms down in Humboldt County and stuff. So the idea that somebody, friends they might have made down on one of those farms might have come back to Idaho with them and, been in Ronie's orbit for a period of time, that is certainly a valid speculation. But as to any specific individuals, I mean, Ronie hung out with a lot of people. She touched a lot of people in the community, and she was often, when she had means, she would give a lot of young people shelter, troubled young kids who were kind of transient, maybe didn't have healthy relationships with their own parents. So it wouldn't surprise me in the least for anyone or any grouping of her kids to bring back some friends from California and have a place to crash with her.
Okay. Do you know if Ronie did any dealing herself?
I don't think she did any large-scale dealing. I'm sure I knew her to sell a bag of weed here and there for sure, but I don't think it was any like large-scale conspiracy sort of major felony situation.
She dealt, because from what we've been told, would it be fair to say she mostly, like you said, dealt a little weed, but she didn't necessarily deal the meth and the harder drugs?
Yeah, not necessarily.
Okay.
Like I said, as far as like drug use community and the community that she in general would spend time with, whether they were or weren't using drugs, Ronie was always inclined to share. So it wouldn't surprise me at all for her to drop a little bag of this or that on any one of her friends who needed a fix, so to speak.
Would it be fair to say though, because you've heard the rumors and you've been told Jerry and Dave were more into the dealing?
Definitely.
Okay.
How does Jimmy connect in the picture?
Jerry?
Jimmy.
Do you know Jimmy Pearsall?
Don't.
Okay.
All right. That was another name that had.
Did you ever go to the shop down in Garden City?
A couple times.
Okay. 'Cause
Um,
apparently he
Oh,
owned
wait.
that building.
Jimmy, yes. Oh, I took his truck out with a chipper once. I'd only met him like a couple of times there at the shop when we were having things maintenance. I'm so sorry.
No,
No,
okay.
that's
I
fine.
kind of forgot
We
that
just-
individual
no.
existed.
Because, and I don't know if you know, he's currently in prison for drug dealing.
Ah,
So,
That doesn't surprise
we
me
can edit
much.
that part out if we want, but that's kind of why.
Yeah, he got some serious charges.
Serious, like he's federal.
Yeah. I guess that doesn't really surprise me, in association with Jerry. I mean, like I said, Jerry never had his priorities really that straight, so it doesn't surprise me that he would have been associating with someone who didn't have their priorities that straight either.
Actually, I don't, because it's in the news. Do you remember when those cell phone rings got taken down for the scam fake cell phones they were selling?
I think I recall hearing something
At the
about
same
it.
time, a great big drug bust got taken, and he was one of them.
Involved there.
And
Yeah.
so that's
Alright.
kind of how, and we've kind of been told some stories that have to do with Jimmy, Jerry, and so